Welcome to the Flight Club Podcast, a woman's guide to leaning out. We give you a behind-the-scenes look at business launch and growth through the stories of successful female entrepreneurs. Here's your host, Felina Hansen, founder and CEO of Hera Hub.
Hello and welcome. I am so excited to share my conversation today with Alexandria Noel Butler. She is affectionately known as Lexi B. She wears many hats, including entrepreneur, speaker, editor, and writer. Her project management career started back in 2011 after graduating from Stanford University, and she has led diverse, large-scale, cross-functional projects from prominent tech companies in Silicon Valley. In April 2017, Lexi B founded Sista Circle, a Black women in tech online community that supports Black women in tech companies and tech-related professions. They have 7,400 and growing members. It's an international community, and she's partnered with organizations such as phenomenally, I can't even say that, Instagram, YouTube, and Slack. Welcome to the show today. So excited to have you, Lexi B.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited to share your story. You have quite an adventure, quite a career path. And so let's, take us back. Where are you from? Talk about Stanford, what drove you to choose that institution, and then take us along your career path.
Yeah, so Stanford was actually a pretty simple choice for me. It was very hard to get in, but a very simple choice. When I was in third or fourth grade, I went to my parents and said that I wanted to go to Oxford, and they asked why. And I said, because it's farthest away from where we are right now, which is St. Louis, Missouri. So imagine being 10 or 11 years old. And so I just thought, I just want to be out of the country. And at the time, the only school that I had heard of out of the United States was Oxford or Cambridge. And so my dad laughed and he said, okay, so totally support this idea of going away to school, but you just have to stay in the 50 states. And that was the rule that I was given. So I did some research, and this is, really early stage, probably pre-Google, Ask G time. And I figured out that California was the farthest away from St. Louis in the 50 states, not including Alaska or Hawaii. And so I went to my parents and I said, I'm going to Stanford. And they said, great. You have to do some work to get there. And that was just always my dream. And I always tell people I was a very goal-oriented child. So it was like, this is what I want to do. Many times not sure why I want to do it or have the language to express why I want to do it. Other than that sounds cool, or that's farthest away from home. But I grew up with some very amazing, supportive parents that really instilled in me this idea of dreaming and this idea of goals. And so even though at 11 or 12 years old, they were aware that I probably don't understand the gravity of being like, I'm going to Stanford, next topic, right? They were definitely willing to help and support that dream.
That's amazing. I mean, seriously, like, how incredible is that? How driven you were. We do have a bit in common on the Missouri side of things. My mom lives in Missouri, but down on Lake of the Ozarks. So I didn't actually grow up there, but beautiful part of the country.
Yes. And she has the best outlet malls.
Yes.
And so, yeah, that's what I did, and went to Stanford and realized very quickly that I was over my head. And I'm sure that every Stanford student at one point thinks they're over their head. But I remember distinctively being 18 years old, third day of school, and just calling my mom and crying in front of the library, because it was this moment of clarity for me where it was like, wow, this is so cool. And there's so many people who just do amazing things, and their parents do amazing things, and that I've never heard of. And then there was also this moment of, this is not for me. Like this is too amazing for me, right? Mm-hmm. I can't dream this big. I can dream, but I can't dream this big. And so I remember my mom calmed me down on those steps. And all she said was, she said, just do you. Let everything happen the way it's going to happen, but do you. And that was it. And that's all that I needed. So I spent my 4 years in school really meeting people and wanting to understand their journey of how they got to where we are right now as undergraduates at Stanford, just trying to navigate being 18, 19 years old. But then also trying to realize that, oh, we're in a class with a world-renowned professor, or, like, oh, so are you taking J.K. Rowling's virtual Harry Potter class? Because that's insane, right? And things like that. And when it came time to pick a career, everyone at Stanford, many people at Stanford, it's very common to say, I want to go into tech. And as a kid coming from St. Louis, Missouri, which is beer, Boeing, and baseball, I really didn't know what tech was. I knew that tech existed. I've definitely worked with tech. I remember I had a Facebook account. I actually started my Facebook account when I went to go visit Stanford as a senior in high school and to connect with all of the other seniors in high school who were possibly going. That's how I started my social media journey. But I didn't really put two and two together of, okay, so this is a company and people work at this company. It wasn't until I was biking around campus and started talking to upperclassmen and realized that, oh, so I could actually work at Facebook. That's a thing, right? And to make matters even more apparent was that at the time, the original Facebook office was literally down the street from campus. So I could bike next to it. I could physically see these buildings and watch random people go in and out with Facebook badges. So I knew that was actually pretty cool, but I was very scared. I didn't know what tech was. And I said, you know what? I'm just not going to go into tech. I'm going to go into things that I know, and therefore go into things that I can dream about. And for me, that was PR. And for me, that was marketing and fashion and, consumer products. And I remember I told my career counselor freshman year, I want to intern for Budweiser and work on the Budweiser commercial. And wouldn't it be cool if I could intern for a producer for a fashion line? I was thinking these big dreams, but these dreams that from a pop culture perspective at the time, I could see it in a magazine, I could see it in a movie. And I was like, I want to do that, right? And so that's what I built my whole undergraduate career on. And then I did those things in internships and experiences and came back senior year, and the career counselor asked me, so this is what we're doing. We're going to get a job in these fields. And I said, absolutely not. I did them. And I realized that I did not want to do that professionally, or at least at the time. The experiences that I had made me realize that this maybe is not for me as my first job. And so what did we do? We hustled, and I found my first job in the technology industry because of privilege. And I have to honor privilege and own my privilege of going to a school that has many connections to tech. Mm-hmm. So I took my first tech job at a company called NetApp. And that was 11 years ago. And now we're here. And I realized very quickly at NetApp that hated my first job at NetApp, but loved tech. And it was like this weird situation. You see the cartoons where you have the cartoon characters and you see the bubbles on top of their head and everything's coming together in their mind. That's what I felt like in my first year in tech. I felt like I was having this outer body experience of realizing the thing that I ran away from all of my undergraduate career and the things that I really enjoyed about fashion and consumer PR, they collide together and they can be in tech. So the next question was really about how can I just pull from all of these experiences and these things that I love to do and these passions, but do it in the technology world in Silicon Valley. And 11 years later, now we're here. So yeah.
Amazing. So let's talk about some of the stops along your journey, your career path here. Looks like you were at NetApp for a little over 4 years. And am I reading this right, Lexi B, that you were really focused on program management, project management?
Yeah. So I was a engineering program manager when I was 22. And if you asked me at 22 what that meant, I'd probably tell you, I don't know, I'm just here. Just trying to figure out my life. And my first year, 2 years at NetApp, I was program managing specifically with engineering. And then my next 2 years, I was moved to a different department. NetApp was a great experience for me from a program management perspective, because I was always moved around to different areas of the company. And it wasn't this decision that I made, right? Because, sometimes in your career, you have these decisions where you are like, I want to move to XYZ group, and you do the work to start that new function or have a new role. And these were things where I would literally have people come to my office and say, okay, so now you're working for this department. In the moment, it was very frustrating. Looking back, it was the greatest gift that NetApp could give me, because I got to learn fundamentally how program management works and build my skills from a foundational level, and then apply those skills to just different things. And I always tell people, when it comes to adulting, you need the foundational skills of whatever job you have. It's very much like cooking in a kitchen. You can have a chef, and chefs all around the world, they have to have these foundational skills, right? They need to know how to saute. They need to know how to chop things. They need to know how to cut things in different ways. They need to know how to bake things. But you have different types of chefs, right? So you may have a baker who definitely focuses on sugary treats and carbs and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, they also do know how to boil, right?
Yeah.
And so I always tell people what NetApp gave me was it gave me the tools to be any type of chef. And it allowed me to dabble in different people's kitchens. So it allowed me to dabble in the kitchen of engineering, if you will. And it allowed me to dabble in the kitchen of marketing. And it allowed me to dabble in the kitchen of like invoices and quotes and things like that. And that was a very phenomenal experience that, again, being young, dumb, and ignorant, I really hated at the time. I remember coming home at night and being so frustrated because I was like, I felt like other people were holding my destiny. I felt as though I come to work and other people would say, well, now you're working here. And no one asked me if I wanted to do that or why I wanted to do it. And in the moment, it sucked. And I'll be frank with you, I do think also looking back on it, it wasn't okay that people thought they could move me around because I was so young. But the flip side of it is that I didn't know what I didn't know. So if they had asked me at the time at 23, do you want to go work in this department? I probably would have been like, no, because I don't know anything about it. So yeah, it's weird how life takes you in certain ways as a young professional, but I was very blessed to be able to dabble in all these types of quote unquote cooking skills, which really affected in a positive manner the next parts of my career journey.
It's a great analogy. I really appreciate that. And it looks like as this process is unfolding at NetApp, you had your first startup, if I'm reading this right. So talk about grown-up truth.
Yes. So while I was at NetApp, annoyed because I felt like all these much older adults had control over my life. And for people who know me personally, the one thing that I hate about anything in the world, even as a child, my parents always joke and say that I've always had a problem with authority. And the issue is not authority. The issue is feeling as though other people control the decisions that I'm making. And I think that manifests at 6 years old as she has a problem with authority, right? How that manifests as a 23-year-old is this very defiant and militant energy of like, y'all can't tell me what to do because you are my manager or you're the head of the department, right? You can tell me this is what we're doing. And if you do not like it, you have a couple of options. And one of those options is you don't have to work here. And whenever I manage new college grads, I tell them that. I say, you have options in your life, right? But sometimes you don't get the options you want in the package you want them. And grown-up truth was really my reaction to that. I was young. I had a car payment. I had student loans. I could not verbalize yet what I'm good at. So therefore, I did not know how to get a new job. So I felt as though I was chained to this organization. And I said, well, if I have to be here to pay off my car and pay off my student loans while I figure out what I'm doing with my life in order to possibly make a change, then I'm going to talk about it. And I'm going to be very defiant about it. And not necessarily about NetApp, but just about what I was feeling. So I started a blog, a blogger account called Grown Up Truth, where I literally just started writing these articles, very much love letters to myself, of saying like, adulting sucks and here's why. And that was my way of defiance. And I noticed quickly that a lot of people started following my articles and commenting on the articles. And I was like, oh, so a lot of other people my age feel this too. And the articles ranged from, very comical. Like I remember I wrote an article, it was like 600 words about working out at the job gym, and how it was just so weird to me that I'm supposed to be at a gym at 6 a.m. so I can work out and then be half naked in a locker room with the senior VP of the company, and then go to a meeting with her as if this is normal, right?
That's a good point.
I remember I wrote it and there were so many people who were like, I never thought about it that way. Like, yeah, has anyone else seen their CEO like half naked and sweating on a treadmill? But then I'm supposed to like see you in the hall and pretend that you're Christ? This is weird. Like this is weird, right? Or then articles talking about like, hey, so no one taught me about taxes. And now I'm sitting in the middle of a Walmart at an H&R block. And this man is saying all this stuff. And I'm quite aware that I have no clue what's going on. But I'm also quite aware that just because this person said this is how I should do my taxes does not mean that I should just do it that way. Does anyone have any help here? Like, how do I do taxes? Right? And things like that. And started growing a following. And so then I contacted some friends of mine from Stanford undergrad who are artists and creative people and people that I started having these conversations with as just friendship over happy hour or over Skype or things like that, and said, well, do you want to write your thoughts down? And we created this amazing magazine that was pretty lively and eventful until probably 2016 when I left NetApp. And it was definitely, when I look back on it, my defiance and really kind of taking over my life through understanding what's going on. And that was Lexi at 23, 24, where I was sitting in conference rooms thinking, what's going on? I don't like, but I currently can't fight it because I don't know why I don't like it, but I just don't like it. And I'm very big on that. Until you can really fundamentally say why you don't like something, can you strategically fight the power, right? And so Grown Up Truth was me trying to navigate all these things in my head and my friends trying to navigate all these things in their head about what does it mean to just grow up. And it's bigger than your job and it's bigger than taxes, but it's all these encompassing things, right? What does it mean to go to the grocery store and have a budget? What does it mean to have a side job to help you achieve certain goals? And things like that. It was a wonderful, wonderful time. In very many ways, it was therapy. So yeah, I'm very proud of it.
That's amazing. I love it. Thank you for sharing that. So I want to move on here. I mean, the last, 5, 6, 7 years here, you've really been at the who's who of tech companies in Silicon Valley, Airbnb, Facebook, and now Twitter. Some of the biggest tech brands in the world. I want to talk about some of your experience there, if I may, and you're welcome to, focus on all or one of those experiences based on how that shaped you. And as you look to, I want to make sure we spend some time on the launch and the idea behind Sista Circle, Black Women in Tech, which you've had now for about 4 years. Where did that idea come from? And then talk about well-known diversity issues in Silicon Valley have been covered by the media extensively. And how did that tie into the building of this organization?
Yeah, so we first have to go to Airbnb to get to Sista Circle because that's where it was started. Airbnb, when I went, was a phenomenal experience. Airbnb was an invitation to be myself, which was weird to me, right? and I don't know if they still do this. I hope they do, but I joined March 21st, 2016, in the first week for all the new hires. You don't work. It's just a week of orientation, and you do these very interesting activities. You meet the leaders of the organization. But the point is that everybody who speaks to you, all the activities that you do, the foundational layer of it is be you, which is very resonating thinking about my mother at 18, me at 18, talking to my mom, crying on the side of the library steps at Stanford when she said, do you? Yeah. And I remember that was a very transformational moment, as I expressed earlier, when she said that to me, because it was like she was giving me permission just to be all of me. And being all of me meant mistakes and triumphs and apologies and screaming and crying and laughter, right? And I had not felt like that until I went to Airbnb, where I felt as though these people were giving me permission to do that. And whether or not they really meant that, because people always have these conversations about companies saying, be your most authentic self. But what they really mean is be your most authentic self to how they define it, right? Yeah. And a separate podcast for a separate day, but literally. So I was like, oh, so you want me to do me? I'm going to do me. I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to be brash. I'm going to be bold. I'm not really concerned about what hierarchy you have at this company, right? If I feel like I want to have a conversation with you, I'm going to send an email or a chat and ask. And Airbnb was a little over 2,000 people. So me sending an email to the head of legal and her responding wasn't that big of a deal because it was so small. And what I realized very quickly was that I could learn so much at Airbnb. I also realized that the work that I just happened to be passionate about, I could do at Airbnb. When I went to Airbnb shortly after the hashtag Airbnb while Black went viral on Twitter. Mm-hmm. And I remember my manager at the time, who was brilliant, she was in rooms with the C-suite every day talking about, what are we going to do about this, right? And understand that when a hashtag like that goes viral, it's not as simple as writing a press release. The right thing to do is to really sit there and fundamentally understand, how did we get here? Right? So like when people say hashtag Airbnb while Black, it is clear about racism, but like, let's get very specific. What is going on? How are people being treated? Are they being treated like this when they request to book a place? Are they being treated like this when they get there? Are they being treated like this when they leave? Is it all of the above? So she was starting to have these conversations, and she allowed me to be in the room with her. And so just watching these leaders at Airbnb, who are former leaders at major companies, have these conversations about what does it mean for a technology company to stand up against discrimination and not just write a press release, but say, okay, so we're going to look at our product and we're possibly going to change how things flow in our product because maybe that can help. And then we're going to update our customer service stuff because maybe that can help. And then we're going to train hosts. Like, look at all of these things. I was like, oh, this is the type of stuff that this is my jam. I am where I need to be. And it wasn't necessarily about the discrimination. It was about, I want to be in rooms with leaders and movers and shakers and very intelligent people actively trying to solve really hard things. And if that is discrimination, great. If that is something else, great. And so when you look at my career post Airbnb, the real thread here, the foundational layer, is me always looking to be in rooms with shakers and movers who want to help solve really hard problems, because that fuels me intellectually. I just nerd out with that kind of thing. And so while I was there at Airbnb, I met some wonderful people who I'm still close to today. And many of them didn't look like me or have the same gender as me, but they were giving me feedback on my career and how I should act. And they were giving me feedback in the best way with the best intention. But I realized very quickly that the feedback they were giving me, I may not be able to do that in the way that they do it. I distinctly remember this guy that I was working with, who probably one of my favorite people that I've ever worked with still to this day. And he pulled me into a room and he said, Lexi, if you're going to be the program manager on this specific thing, you need to be more direct, because we don't have time for you to be not direct, right? Walk in a room, say what you're going to say. If they don't like it, who cares? We have to get this done. And I remember looking at him and thinking in my head, if I walked in a room and was as direct as you were, I would get fired.
Interesting. Did you truly believe that?
I truly believed it. And to be frank with you, to this day, as a dark-skinned Black woman, I still believe it. Mm-hmm. I think that how we show up in the world and how we show up at work, people receive and interpret things differently, right? If a woman walks in the room and is as direct as this person was, and probably still is in his career, she'd be called everything but a child of God.
Yeah.
And so I remember it's very
so frustrating. This is like,
true.
I'm sorry. I to pause on this, because it's such an important conversation, Lexi, to have. And as somebody, I only spent, a short part of my career working for somebody else. I've been an entrepreneur now 17 years, and I don't know, my jaw drops sometimes. I forget that this is still happening in the world.
It 100% happens, because this is what happens. What happens is that a woman walks in the room and says something, and regardless if you like it or you don't like it, we collectively as a corporate working world society, if you live in the corporate world, we are reviewed by our peers. So if I have one person saying Lexi was direct, and because of her her directness and her effectiveness, we got this done. But if I have 7 people on my review say Lexi is direct and therefore she's really mean and it's hard to work with her and it brings a hostile work environment, I am reviewed by my peers, which I always tell people to some extent is an issue, because look what happens with that, right? So my money, my stock options, my salary, my place in the company, my possible promotion is many times based on how people receive me, not on what I was trying to do or what I actually did. Yeah. So I remember in this moment talking to this man and not saying it out loud. Lexi at 26, 27 was too scared to say it out loud. But in my head, I was like, okay, so I just got some feedback. I need to be more direct, because because my indirectness is not bringing efficiency. So I need to figure out how to be more efficient to drive things faster. This man, who happens to be white and straight and in a position of power, is saying how you do that is be more direct. I can't be direct like him.
Yeah.
So then I was like, well, maybe if I find a Black woman who's a little bit older, a little bit wiser, has had experience navigating this, she can help me achieve the goal of what this mentor at this company is trying to get me to do, which is great, right? But I just can't be as direct as he is. So maybe it's not about doing it his way, but getting to the outcome, even if I don't do it his way. Mm-hmm. I couldn't find any Black women who could help me do that.
Yeah.
And that's how Sista Circle was born. I did not know enough Black women leaders or mid-level managers that could help me do that. At NetApp, I had this strong pool of Black women. I still call them my fairy godmothers, but they were in their 50s, 60s, about to retire. So we also have a generational gap, right? Because I can't do it like them, because how they would do it is different because of a generational gap. I didn't have anyone who was in their mid 30s, early 40s that I could go to and say, okay, so I need to get to this outcome because I want to be better. But he says that I have to do it this way. And we all know that if I do it this way, I could lose my job. Right. So I just started a group, and I went online on Facebook, and I started a group, and I said, okay, I brought in 10 of my friends who were Black, who identified as Black and a woman in tech. And I already knew them. And I said, invite your friends. And then I talked to other Black folks at Airbnb. And I said, hey, how about you join and invite your friends? And when I was talking to the Black women at Airbnb and telling them, like, here's my dilemma, how do I do this? They were also telling me about their dilemmas that were very similar, right? They were like, yeah, I actually don't know anyone you could talk to. I would love to meet other people too, right? Yeah. So we started this group, and that was April 2017. And now we have 7,400 plus women around the world having similar conversations, or just talking about their kid, or talking about dating, or, talking about how to navigate COVID, or talking about, hey, can anybody talk to me about this company? Would love to learn more. I saw this job on the internet and just really want to experience that. Or, hey, my team is hiring. Let me know if you have any questions. And it's become this safe space of solidarity for Black women, where they are allowed to be whole. And I think many times women in the world, because of patriarchal oppression, we are not allowed to be whole in any situation, right? When we're at work, we're at work. God forbid you're a woman and you're a mother and you're a lover and you like to travel. You're just at work, right? And then when you're home, and God forbid, you're also a professional, right? Because when you're at home, okay, if you have kids, okay, well, I'm at home with the kids, you know what I mean? And so it was like, how do we create a community where it's like, you're allowed to be all of those things at the exact same time. And if at 8 a.m., you want to specifically hone in on how your manager is sending you mini microaggressions and what you should do. And then at 8:05, you want to specifically hone in on the fact that you need a dog hotel for your puppy. And then at 8:32, if you're like, actually, now I want to talk about, what am I going to do on my next solo vacation? And does anybody else live in the area? And would you like to go to dinner? I give you permission to be you without being judged for it. And that's what the group has become.
That's amazing. Well, thank you for your leadership. I know these sacred spaces are so, so important to us. So talk a bit about, what's next, Lexi? What's next for Sista Circle? What's next for your career? What's on the horizon? What are you excited about for 2021? Let's talk about that.
I think that's a great question, because 2020 for me was, I called it my year of breathing, because to really sit down and say, what is next? It's the first time in my whole entire life where I had a year to plan New Year's Eve resolutions, which is crazy. So 2021 will be very interesting, because I have very specific goals. I think 2021, the needs for Sista Circle, Black women in tech, is to continue partnering with tech organizations, but also really trying to find our place in our own platform. Like, what does it look like to 100% own not only the community and the group, but also own the platform in which it stands on? And I think especially, 2020, talking about civil unrest and those kinds of things and Black generational wealth, that's very important. So let's explore that. Also, I think it's really important for Sista Circle to really, really dive deep into our partnership with Black-owned businesses throughout the world. I think there's a lot of synergy there. When you have 7,400 plus women working in tech, students trying to get into tech, and making sure that they are aware of all of these phenomenal Black businesses, and how can we make sure Black generational wealth is continued there as well. And we produce a phenomenal gift guide that we do every single year. But this year it was more intentional. The past years have been very much like, oh, it's the holidays, get a gift. And the guide that was produced and published about 10 days ago was really about like, hey, you don't have to just buy Black during the holidays or during the end of the year. And so what does it look like for us to have more active, direct partnerships with those organizations who are in that Buy Black guide moving forward in 2021? I think for me personally, what's really big in 2021 is to continue speaking engagements. I'm very big on career branding and career development for new college grads. And so really starting to build that brand more strategically, with having those conversations to new college grads and interns and college students about like, here's what you actually need to understand about your life, right? It's a mix of, yes, follow your passions, but first figure out what your passions are. I'm tired of us telling these 22 to 25-year-olds to follow their passions, but then don't give them tools to figure out what their passion actually is. And then also, I'm also tired of us telling, the next generation coming in that all they need to do is follow their passion, when I'm very big on life owes you nothing. And so sometimes following your passion actually means doing jobs and being in situations that make you uncomfortable and that you may not like on a day-to-day basis. But as long as you're healthy and safe, that's what you may need to do to pay this rent, right? There is nothing wrong with doing something to pay rent or to pay off your car while you build something in the back end that fulfills you. And so looking at those types of things. And then lastly, doing a lot of speaking with mid-level managers. I'm very big on that recently, with having real conversations about not diversity and inclusion, but about equity. And I think that as a Black woman in the technology industry, we've really talked about D&I a lot. And I'm the one in the back, once again, disrupting authority. And I've always can we just talk about equity? Can we talk about retention? Because if you treat me right at your organization and you retain me, that's really important than you hiring all these Black and brown bodies and then treating them horribly. So what does it look like for mid-level managers to really understand how to manage people in an equitable practice? What does it look like for leaders to understand their layers of privilege? And those layers are bigger than race and gender and sexuality, right? So doing a lot of privilege workshops and manager equity training. So it can just be better for the little Lexi B, who's 18, 19 years old. And she can fight new battles. She doesn't have to fight the battles that I had to fight.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. For listeners want to get in touch with you, want to learn about all the amazing things that you talked about and that you're up to in 2021, what's the best way for them to do that, Lexi?
The best way is probably my website, naturallylexi.com, and just go to the contact tab and send me an email. And I'd love to hear from all of you. So yes, send me a note, say hi.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today. I've so enjoyed our conversation.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for joining this week's episode of Flight Club, sponsored by Hera Hub. We look forward to sharing more success stories with you soon.